please take a seat. A warm welcome to you both, and especially to our guest, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. First, we will hear your remarks, and then we will have a moderated discussion, and of course, we will have questions from the audience. President Alexander Stubb, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. President Zelenskyy and myself just decided that it's best to be very short.
I think we have a problem with the microphone here.
Perhaps the problem was
Yes.
that it wasn't on. Never give a president a mic. Really nice to see all of you. I think President Zelenskyy and I will be very short in the beginning just to have a good Q&A. Coming here, I was thinking about what kind of a moment are we living in. And I was reminded of the fact that I started studying in 1989, just when the Berlin Wall fell and then the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And I think we're living in one of these inflection point moments in history. It's the 1918, 1945, or 1989 moment of our generation. And by that I mean to say that after World War I think the leaders of the time had a good idea. They wanted to create the League of Nations, but unfortunately it wasn't strong enough. We ended up in World War II, and then in 1945, the leaders of the time, actually partially in Yalta, out of all places, decided to set up the United Nations. And I think the system that was set up at the time, for all intents and purposes, worked fairly well, up until 1989, when the Cold War ended. And that was a moment when many of us felt that all of the world's 200 nation states are going to start moving towards some kind of a combination of liberal democracy, market economy, and globalization. But I actually think, and my main point today, is that on the 24th of February, 2022, that world was shattered. We're now living in a post-Cold War era. And in my mind, in the past 3 years, the world has changed more than in the past 30 years together. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying it that the moment is like 1918, 1945, or 1989. We can get it wrong, we can get it more or less right, or we can even sort of just try to let it happen. For me, the choice is very simple. We either have a multilateral world with rules and strong international institutions and an order, or we have a multipolar world which is disorderly and based on transactions and deals. And I say this as my final point. This is not only about the war in Ukraine, but the war of aggression put forward by Russia is going to change the world order. And I think all of us have agency in this. We are the ones who decide the direction in which the world is going to go. And that's why I think that these weeks, these coming months, are so important. If we don't end up with a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, then we will end up in a very disorderly and transactional world. And I think that's why we're having this conversation here today.
Thank you very much. And now, President Zelenskyy, the floor is yours.
Доброго дня.
Good afternoon.
If you can use it. No, I'm not addressing to my wife. No, it's...
My wife needs translation when I speak.
Yeah. If I can use my
Sure,
native
yes, you can.
Okay.
Please do.
Because it's very difficult. If I speak English, so I have translation to Ukrainian here. It's difficult for me to speak English. That's why I will try to speak Ukrainian. I hope that they will not translate to English. Okay, so
So, I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to express me and my wife. We want to express our gratitude for the hospitality of your people, of all of you. Alexander, I'd like to thank you. And for us, it is very important what I told you today at the press conference. I was very open and candid that we drive and we see our flags on your streets, and that is the answer to everything. That is the answer to Russia, that Ukraine is not alone, and Russia is alone. Russia is an aggressor, and today it's alone. And it speaks of your history, of great respect to your history, to your struggle, and we feel all of it. And we see today Finland as an independent country, as a country in the European Union, as a NATO member country, and I sincerely congratulate you on this. This is of utmost importance, and we've spoken that in the times of this war, everything changed so much, and how people started to perceive NATO. And I'm always very frank. I do not believe that there is something good in the war. No, there are only bad things, but the fact that it provided such an impetus to many countries, to Finland, to Sweden, and the citizens of your countries changed the attitude towards the defensive alliance and joined the NATO, and that using this moment, all of the alliance became bolder, and I believe it is so, and a lot of leadership emerged in the world. I think it is some positive things, not so many that come from the war, but these are significant steps that took place. As you said, Alexander, regarding the infrastructure of the security that will be after the end of this war, after this biggest land warfare in Europe in the recent 100 years. And yes, the world will change, and we believe and fight for the world to change only for the better, so that the world undoubtedly is free, so that the values are right among all the people, and so that there was a lot of freedom and choice. And I think that our struggle for independence of Ukraine eventually is a war for the freedom of all of Europe. And I am so grateful that on this way we are alongside such partners as you. And I would very much want that you, your children, grandchildren, I didn't want to speak about grandchildren so that you do not have feeling that I am old man. Yes, but I wish that all of them are safe and that there is no war. And thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you for you have such attitude towards Ukrainians, towards Ukrainian students. We see Ukrainian studies here. We thank you for all of it. Glory to Ukraine.
Let's start with a few questions. We know that you are having a phone call later today with President Trump, and yesterday the two presidents, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, had a phone call. Where do we stand now when it comes to a possible ceasefire and an eventual peace process? Please, comments by both.
You're the boss.
Oh, no. Да, у нас буде...
Yes, we will have today a conversation with the President of the United States of America, and I believe that it's wishful to speak about the details of the conversation after the call, but we foresee the topics on which we will have the dialogue. We had a very important meeting of two teams in Saudi Arabia. I believe it was a very constructive meeting. There were positive things. Ukraine agreed to an unconditional silence or unconditional ceasefire. the cessation of fire, and it was important to demonstrate that we genuinely want peace since the very first second of the war, but it was important to articulate publicly, diplomatically. We were sure that Putin will do everything to not support such format of de-escalation and the format of truly moving on to diplomatic track in this war, and he demonstrated exactly that. Where we stand now, there was a conversation between Presidents Trump and Putin. I'd like to hear the details. I hope to hear on them today. But what was said is that President of the United States emphasized the ceasefire on the energy infrastructure of both countries, energy, civilian infrastructure, water supply, and there was also an issue raised regarding the silence at sea. Yes, and I think that our technical team will be ready in the nearest days. We will agree, I think, this date today with President Trump, and our technical team will depart to Saudi Arabia, and hopefully we will manage to push Putin and to make the first step to the end of the war. This is where we stand now.
Our take is obviously very similar, and the way in which we want to see it is you separate the process into two. The first is a ceasefire. That's basically when the guns stop and the killing stops. And the second phase is the actual peace process. And it's very important to separate the two. And I think it's quite clear now that Ukraine wants peace and a ceasefire. Finland wants peace and a ceasefire. Europe wants peace and a ceasefire. The United States wants peace and a ceasefire. And now the puck is in the Russian zone. You know, we're not sure whether they actually want that. We have to remember that Ukraine has approved the ceasefire without any kind of conditions. And yesterday's conversation proved that Putin would not be willing to do that. His ceasefire is very partial. It only touches upon energy and infrastructure. It depends on how you actually define it. So now we just have to hope that the American efforts, and especially the efforts of President Trump, will continue to put pressure on Russia. That is the key at this particular moment, which in my mind, of course, means that you need to increase the sanctions, you need to use the frozen assets, and you need to continue arming Ukraine in order for Russia to understand that it cannot postpone the ceasefire or the peace negotiations anymore.
Yes, you've said that maximum pressure should be put on Russia, and now you mentioned a few things that should be done. Are they being done, and how to really achieve them?
Well, I mean, yes and no. Obviously, the 17 sanction packages that the European Union has put forward, the biggest set of instrumentalized instruments of pressure that you can put on a particular country. The Americans have been very good on sanctions as well, and I'm just off the phone with Senator Lindsey Graham, who is pushing through a bill in the Senate to maximize the pressure that if Russia does not improve the ceasefire, then sanctions will be increased. So that's one part of it. The second part is the usage of the frozen assets, roughly 300 billion euros, which are now only being partially used from the basic windfall of the profits of the interests. And I think those need to be used fully to support Ukraine. And the third way we do it then is basically to keep on rearming and militarizing Ukraine. Those are the three things that we need to do.
President Zelenskyy.
Дякую.
Thank you. Sanctions are important, and President Trump demonstrated that he's ready to go for peace through strength, yes, but for us it is very important that he applies strong steps against Putin. Putin did not agree to an absolute silence, unconditional silence, and it is very important to emphasize it. And he will be trying to find some opportunities to bypass the full silence, because he needs to put pressure. He wants to put pressure against Ukraine, and it is possible by conducting military operations on the battlefield or by permanently escalating in the sky, at sea, using missiles, ballistic missiles, so that people live in permanent shock, in permanent discomfort, under permanent danger. This is what he needs. So he needs to have this or that instrument of intimidation, to leave it in his hands, to find for himself the best conditions. If all the world squeezes him out to end this war, we have not yet reached this stage, but when we reach it, he will want to have such instrument in his hands. That is why he does not want a total ceasefire.
Пропозиція з самого початку була
Our proposal since the very beginning was silence in the sky and at sea, and we understood from the dialogue of Americans and Russians that if speaking about ceasefire, we must speak about the full ceasefire. We back then said that we're ready for the full ceasefire because I believe that it was a right, bold, logical step from our end. And when we have agreed to a full ceasefire, Russia found another instrument on how to obstruct the monitoring of ceasefire. So it will happen all the time. So what Alexander said, sanctions must be there and work. The issue is how they work. I think that today we must not speak about the quantity but of quality of the sanctions, to continue introducing sanction packages, but of the qualitative continuation, because there is bypassing of sanctions, circumvention. There are people who have been permanently crossed out of the lists of sanctions. In Europe, Hungary always does it, or it can happen in the United States, but now we believe that Mr. President Trump will introduce even stronger personal sanctions. The second dimension of sanctions is banking sphere. There are banks that are excluded and who bypass the sanctions. There are countries who facilitate by circumvention of sanctions. Different countries. There are companies who are allowed to bypass sanctions. And if we're speaking about this shadow fleet, and we are speaking about the hundreds of vessels that bypass the sanctions, because the sanctions have been introduced only into a separate list against the separate list of shadow fleet. So I would very much want, and I do believe that America will demonstrate serious steps on sanctions policy from the point of view of quality, not only quantity.
When I was listening to your opening remarks, I thought you sounded a bit positive, quite positive, or was I lost in translation?
А як ви хочете?
Well, I wish
I
there
think
would
you-
be
I think you have-
reason for optimism, but I don't know if there is.
We have to be positive because of our people, because of our heroic soldiers, and because of such our friends. Thank you.
Thank you. You also said that leadership has emerged in the world, so I have a question about Europe. Of course, Europe and the European Union have been stepping up, but what should Europe do? How can Europe take real initiative in order to help achieving a just and lasting peace, and to actually make Europe a real player on the world stage?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's very important to understand that there's good momentum in Europe in general right now. I don't think in my 30 years of studying the European Union, I've never seen the European Union more united than what we have been in the past 3 years. When we feel that there is an outside aggressor that threatens us, we unite. The peace facility basically became a war facility for Ukraine. the transport of military equipment, of financial aid, etc. Everyone stands, almost everyone stands, minus one or two, behind Ukraine. And I'm also really glad to see the leadership that the United Kingdom and especially Keir Starmer has taken. So in a kind of an absurd way, this has brought the continent closer to the British Isles again, which is not a bad thing at all, quite the contrary. Now, what Europe needs to do now is, number one, security arrangements. That's why President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer have called upon a coalition of willing. So if we are in a situation whereby the number one security stop is Ukraine and 800,000 heroic soldiers, the number two is going to be Europe with some kind of a security arrangement, and then hopefully backed up, by the United States in one way or another. The second thing, and I'll finish with this, I think it's been remarkable to see that in the first 3 months of President Trump in office, we will have seen so much pressure on the European side that they have done more about their own defense than they have done in 30 years previously. So Donald Trump has pushed in 3 months European defense more than in 30 years previously. And I think this is a very important message for the Europeans as well, that we have to take more responsibility for our security as such.
Так говорять, є європейський спосіб життя. І мені здається, це наше життя в Європі.
Life. And it seems to me that that is life in Europe that we like. We like many things. There are certain things that we defend. There are things we disagree with. But overall, it is our life in Europe that we like. That is, that Ukraine is today forced to defend. And I do not think that it is the best thing for any country in the world or a country in Europe, that militarization is the best thing, because you want to spend money on different things, on social care, on infrastructure, on many interesting and important things. But, and this but is named neighbor, Russia. And we have it and you have it, unfortunately, such neighbor. It happens so. Regrettably, it happens so, and we need to defend this way of life. Reasonably, to defend with technologies. The issue is not that we need 10 times more army than Russian one, but we need to be stronger than Russia. And in Europe, it can be done only when we're united, because no country in Europe can on its own build the army as Russia. Because then we will spend money not on life and on European way of life that we adore, but we will spend money only on weapons. But to be together, to be united by such security infrastructure, defensive infrastructure, we are capable to do that. Somebody is better at sea, somebody in the sky, somebody is better in electronic warfare, somebody is good at cybersecurity, somebody is good at drones. This war gave us the biggest level in drones and defensive technologies, and it will be cheaper if we share these technologies after the war with our partners who were financing with us these technologies, who were helping us, because all these technologies will help us to withstand, defend our way of life, to allow our societies to live in security and know that there is protection from any, it's not only about weapons, from any cyber attacks, disinformation, infringement of our comfort way of life, and I believe peaceful way of life. So I believe to build such united infrastructure of defense, such united army, with state-of-the-art technologies, I think that would be a step forward to defense of our European way of life.
Stubb mentioned some kind of a security arrangement. Do you have any special requests for Finland?
Да. Завжди.
Would love to hear them.
Олександр вже зазначив, що одна з реальних
Mentioned that one of the real key guarantees of security in Ukraine that is a boundary between Russia and its ambitious future, not very bright wishes, that is the protection of Europe. It's there. It's in Ukraine. And our army is one of the key security guarantees. 800,000 is a serious army and serious experience. That is why our training programs is something we should do together in terms of military education. I think this is important. Next, our co-production. Co-production efforts in Ukraine and in Finland. Today we met with your key companies. Well, I wouldn't say key companies. Maybe some of them didn't come and, they would get offended. But we met with key companies and I believe building the key platforms here in Ukraine and in Finland, it's very important to do. We need your support on our path towards European Union. That's our economic security guarantees, and they're important for us. And in any case, regardless that Ukraine is not supported in its aspirations towards the NATO alliance, nobody has stopped us actually on this track, and we will need the support of partners on that. Thank you as well.
In general, what we need to understand sort of mentally is that Ukrainian security is the core and key part of European security. And it is in our interest that there are strong security arrangements in Ukraine so as to prevent Russia from doing this ever again. There are many reasons why we support Ukraine. The most important are the principled and values-based reasons, because we have an affinity with what's going on in Ukraine. We share the values and we share Ukraine's European and Western aspirations. But then there's also the interest part. It is in all of our vested interests that Ukraine wins this war. So that's when we look at security arrangements by and large, we need to think about them as part of Finnish, Nordic, and European security by and large.
We're here at the University of Helsinki, and obviously we have many students in the audience. They're both from Finland and Ukraine, and they will live their adult lives in a very different world, like you already said in your opening remarks. So what is your message to them?
Maybe they have messages to us.
They do have, but I'm sure, you said that we always need to be optimistic, for example, but it's quite hard in this time. Just
Alexander,
silence.
maybe from your side, your experience, because I'm younger, may you have more experience. But you look younger.
Don't remind me that I turned 57 on the 1st of April, and it's no joke. Okay, now the way in which I want to turn it to the students is to say that there are a lot of people who live a deterministic and cynical life. They think that everything is somehow pre-concocted and that a human being doesn't have an impact. I fundamentally disagree with that approach. Though in 1989, when I was studying, it was all going in the right direction. It was all about peace. It was all about democracy and freedom over autocracy and communism and many other things. But what we failed to understand at that time was that these things are not automatic. They don't happen just like that. You have to do it yourself. You have to have agency, you have to have impact. So to all of the students around here today, though through your different channels you get horrible news, you see war, you see misery, you see transaction, you believe that the world that used to exist was better. Don't believe in that. You are the ones who make this world. You are the ones who are going to lead in the future. You are the ones who are going to create an international system, institution, norms, and rules. So don't give up hope, because if you do that, then all of us are doomed, including the younger generation and me.
And now we get to hear from the students. Let's hear from Ilona Sorri first. You're a master's student in global politics. Please, go ahead.
President Zelenskyy, President Stubb, thank you for being here. As you know, here in Finland, we feel very deeply for Ukraine. So building on what President Stubb just said, what can we as ordinary citizens do for Ukraine at this very critical moment? Thank you.
Дякую вам. Я хотів би вам сказати, що кожен лідер
To you that every leader is always using not only his experience or her experience, but also support of their people when they make difficult decisions. When Russia started occupation and started war against us, not all countries were on board with us immediately, because it's a challenge. It's also a challenge within anyone's country, and it's a challenge for the Russians to show that you are not afraid of them. And I think many leaders, besides having a strong position, a strong pro-Ukrainian position, I think it was just an honest position, a fair position, but it was also a pro-Ukrainian position. But besides that, everybody was also looking at the attitude of their people, at the attitude of the young people, students of every generation. And the fact that Finland, all of you, from the very beginning, the people were going out into the streets, supporting us in social media, with flags in the streets, which is what I mentioned in the beginning. You gave a strong message, you sent a strong message to your political leaders who were then making decisions to support Ukraine and to support the support packages. I don't want to go into the details, but all of these are important elements of the puzzle to support Ukraine. And this bravery, this courage is always given by the population, by the nation, and I want to thank for that. So when you're asking what you could do, you did that. You gave support, you gave confidence to the political leaders of your state, volunteers. We're very grateful for that, for all of that support to students, from students. Ukrainians of different age came here, and you gave them a place to stay and showed your warm attitude. I think these are important historical steps that the people of Finland have already done, and we thank you for that.
Yeah.
Then here in the front we have Jari Eloranta, Professor of Economic History.
Thank you. Thank you, President Stubb and Zelenskyy. It's indeed an honor that you're here having this discussion. So I wanted to ask you, what will be the role of smaller nations like Finland in the rebuilding of Ukraine, especially in the longer term? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we speak a lot about security guarantees for Ukraine. The part of these security guarantees, of course, economic direction. And we speak also about renovation of Ukraine. For us, it's very important. Those countries who helped us during all this, crucial period, during all this war, all these partners, Finland, one of these partners. And again, we are thankful for this. All the partners, all the countries who've been with us, all the businesses of those countries who've been really very helpful, participating us during this period of time, they will rebuild Ukraine. And it's very good. It's not just support from your side. This is very good partnership really very good. This is good for business. A lot of countries, believe me, there are a lot of partners who now began to speak with us. Some partners which voices we didn't hear from the very beginning of the war, or they, you know, tried to balance between us and Russia. No, first friends and then others. And I think this is important for us. We know each other. During the war, a lot of companies understood each other, and a lot of companies organized co-production. We have it. We have some very good relations, for example, today with Nokia. Yes, they are very big partners, and a lot of Insta and a lot of some other companies which present today in our market. It's very helpful, I think, also for innovation. And as I said, contingents, which is very important when countries can bring security for Ukraine. I think this is also important in military direction and defense industry.
Yeah, I think just 2 quick points on that. First of all, I think reconstruction for everyone in Europe should be a low-hanging fruit. We're not talking about some kind of a stack of Marshall aid suddenly going to Ukraine. This is, as the president noted, a business opportunity to work together. The second thing we need to do is European Union membership for Ukraine. Part of the internal market, I think that's going to be one of the best security guarantees they can get.
And we still have Aaro Anttila, student from the University of Tampere.
Thank you, Mr.
Там
President, for having time for
погано
our questions.
дівчинки. Може, давайте зробимо паузу, допоможемо їй.
Water.
Water. We have water.
This is
Yeah, take.
yes.
Okay.
Just a few moments. First things first. Okay, just some dizziness, so we can continue with another question. It was Aaro Anttila from the
From
University
Tampere
of Tampere.
University. Yeah, thank you. Could you explain how the legacy of the Cossack hetmanate is expressed in modern Ukrainian policy or political culture? Дякую.
I think that was for you, huh?
Who knows? Who knows? Я думаю, якщо чесно,
I think, honestly, it's not a fact that, this question is best addressed to me. I think the students who are studying Ukrainian history and know a lot of different details could give an answer. The hetmans of Ukraine, first of all, are leaders of Ukraine who truly wanted and carried the history of Ukraine through the years of struggle for independence, of fighting for independence. You know that Ukraine has been fighting for its independence for decades and hundreds of years. And it was losing often. It's like at war. There is a fight, a battle that you win, but most important thing is who's gonna win the war at the end. Ultimately, Ukraine has been through a lot of different battles, and it won, but it also lost some of them. And it turned out, it so happened that Ukraine was losing the battle the battle for its independence that President of Finland mentioned today. Because the most important thing, we may not deoccupy all of the territories, we may not have enough energy right now, but legally we will never recognize that they are Russian. Certain territories are historically ours and they will return eventually. But there is one thing that Putin wants to destroy is the independence of Ukraine, our sovereignty, our identity. And it's not just a wish. This is fighting for Ukraine's existence. And I think experience of the hetmans of Ukraine was very different in different times and different years of fighting for Ukraine. And we all have to use that experience, to learn from that experience. Our soldiers are also learning Ukrainian history, and they know many hetmans, they know their tactics, they know their strategies, their military strategies. On my way to Finland, we visited our military training institute, and our future soldiers, our cadets, are learning the history of Ukraine, the history of Ukrainian hetmans, and the history of Ukraine's fight for independence. And I think it helps a lot.
Because I know that you study Ukrainian history, but because we're at university, one of the most important works that I read at university was Robert Conquest's Harvest of Sorrow. I think every Finn should read that at some stage just to understand the core of Ukrainian identity and how Russian imperialism was trying to kill it.
President Zelenskyy, President Stubb, thank you so much for your time and, of course, your efforts. And I think everybody agrees when I say that may freedom prevail and win. Thank you so much.
Thank you.